Hey everybody, and welcome back to FigFed News, the March 26, 2024 edition of your Fake Figure Wrestling News. Let's get started. So in wrestling news, Robert Gibson and Ricky Morton are in talks of possibly being signed onto the Ultimate roster. Also announced is ECW has announced a revival and will have a 20-man roster. This will be Ultimate style only. It's going to consist of a world title and ECW championship, ECW TV championship, and an ECW Tag Team Championship. It's going to have 26 shows. It won't be weekly. It'll be bi-weekly. And of those 26, 6 of those will be pay-per-view oriented. So let's get started for the match results of the week. And this week was a new roster for the WWFE, as we had Owen Hart debut and defeat LA Knight. EC3 defeats Steve Blackman by pinfall. Also on Rising Up, Razor Ramon would defeat Simon Dean by pinfall in his debut. Imperium debuted and defeated Bo Dallas, George Steele, and Iron Sheik by pinfall. This was George Steele's final match before moving over to WCW. The main event would see Billy Graham defeat Gangrel by submission. Now back onto the main show, Triple H would come out and say he deserves a title shot, only be interrupted by Sid saying that he deserves a title rematch. Stone Cold Steve Austin would debut and defeat Val Venis by pinfall. And Matt Hardy would also make his debut and introduce his brother and say they want the tag titles. They would then go on to defeat Jake and Jesse Gemini by pinfall in a non-title tag team match. And Bret Hart says he was cheated, but he doesn't want a rematch. He wants the world title. So the main event set for tonight would see those three face each other. However, Sid would defeat Bret Hart and Triple H by pinfall after Roddy Piper interfered and cost Bret Hart the win. This week, ECW held its not only first show, but it was also a title show filled with lots of titles, as they decided to crown champions for all their vacant titles. So on Level Up, we had George Steele defeat Steven Richards to win the Hardcore Championship. Junkyard Dog and Ricky Steamboat would defeat the Singh Brothers by pinfall. And the main event saw Ryan Sakota defeat William Regal by pinfall. Over on the Cruiserweight side, Drew Gulak would defeat Cedric Alexander by submission to win the WCW Cruiserweight title. Sean O'Haire would come out and says he needs to be a world champion. WCW needs a world champion. Bill Goldberg would come out and interrupt and says he should be the man. Then we go back to commercial break. After we come back, Great Muta would defeat David Otunga by pinfall. Drew McIntyre would come out debuting and saying that he should fight for the championship as he was a World War III runner-up and needs to prove that he's a real deal. Then the Fashion Police would come out and defeat Street Profits in a very high-flying, exciting new blood match. Then it would be Dolph Ziggler who came out saying since he's a new guy, he deserves the opportunity that he never lost here in WCW because he's new, hasn't started. So the Nasty Boys would go on to defeat Brainbusters to win the WCW tag titles. The main event would see Sean O'Haire defeat Dolph Ziggler, Drew McIntyre, and Bill Goldberg by pinfall. Sean O'Haire would celebrate saying he deserved this, unlike Batista, stirring the pot between him and Batista from the previous show. Your new world WCW champion, Sean O'Haire. ECW will start next week with Adam Cole, Bobby Fish, Kyle O'Reilly, and Roderick Strong, as well as Chris Jericho, Road Dogg, Finn Balor, Akira Tozawa, Bruno Sammartino, Edge, Hillbilly Jim, Kofi Kingston, Xavier Woods, Nikolai Volkov, Paul Burchill, Randy Orton, Rick Martel, Scott Steiner, Shawn Michaels, and Test. Their contract lengths have not been included, as they are basically a development towards WCW or WWFE, so it is at least a one-year deal with them, and then they will be eligible for the draft. AEW held a show, though, this week, a pay-per-view, in fact, All In. The buy-in would see Sammy Guevara defeat Hook by pinfall. The Best Friends defeat Death Triangle, retain their trios titles. FTR defeats Powerhouse Hobbs and Ricky Starks by pinfall. Wardlow would defeat MJF by pinfall to win the TNT Championship. Kenny Omega defeats Miro by pinfall. Dustin Rhodes would defeat Adam Page by pinfall to win the FTW Championship. Brody King would also secure a victory over Samoa Joe to win the International Championship. And the Young Bucks vs. Jurassic Express ended in a double countout. The main event would see CM Punk defeat Malachi Black by pinfall after Samoa Joe would interfere, getting revenge for losing his title to Brody King. CM Punk is now a two-time AEW World Champion. NXT held a small show this week as Karrion Kross defeats MVP, getting his victory back from last week. Alpha Academy would defeat MSK by pinfall, and the main event saw Damian Priest defeat Carmelo Hayes by pinfall. Currently, there is no World Champion NXT or North American Champion after Braun Breaker forfeited the titles, vacated them, and left the brand abruptly. So next week, hopefully, we will figure out the new title situation. IWGP would see Tony Mamaluke and Vito defeat Psychosis and Trevor Murdoch, who teamed up. Jerry Lynn would defeat Ethan Page by pinfall. Scotty Riggs and Mike Knox would defeat Billy Kidman and Paul London in a non-title tag match. And the main event would see Snitsky defeat Bill DeMott by pinfall, earning a world title shot at the next IWGP pay-per-view. Impact would have a show this week as Mabel defeats Mark Henry by pinfall. The Viking Raiders would defeat Enzo Amore and Big Cass by pinfall. Main event would see David Hart Smith defeat Lince Dorado by pinfall. This is, of course, a new wrestling roster show. No champions were present, as we wanted to see what the new guys bring to the table. Nothing on Red Impact this week. However, Ring of Honor, Ultimo Dragon would return and defeat John Silver by submission. This is after he had decided to go to JPW, only to then decide to get a reach out, if you will, to re-sign with the company at the last minute and come back. Brody Lee would defeat Eddie Kingston by pinfall. In the main event, we'd see Kip Sabian defeat Lance Archer by DQ after Lance brutally powerbombed Kip on the outside, despite it was clear he could no longer compete. UWF had no show this week, although they are gearing up for a pay-per-view very shortly. TNA had a small show this week. Sean Daivari defeating Ivan Putski. Manic defeats Sylvester Turkey by pinfall. And Shark Boy would defeat Hernandez by countout. No show for the NWA, ORH, or the WWC, as they will be holding a WrestlePalooza event. It's a one-night only event that will take place here in the future, crowning multiple champions of multiple brands. GCW, of course, still continues with no show yet, although their roster has added John Heidenreich and Sonata and Roosh to their roster. So until next week, take care.